What's the best prank you've ever heard of, seen, experienced? When my parents first got married, this is maybe 1948 or so. My mother took the morning newspaper on April Fool's Day, hid it away, and gave it to my father on April Fool's Day morning the following year. Asterisk. He says that's when he realized it was all over for him. He would never be safe again. While they were still dating, during World War II, they went to a costume party and my dad made a hat with a relay station on it. He wired the lights to a switch in his pocket and flashed out dirty jokes with the lights to his fighter pilot buddies and Morse code throughout the night. So the party would be going on, and then all the guys would burst out laughing for no apparent reason. Anyway, just thought I'd throw in a few from the old school. Lol, for there being a time when a whole group of people at a party could understand dirty jokes made in Morse code. Yup, it was a group of fighter pilots, P-47s, in World War II. They had to know it to the point that they could hold conversations and read blinking lights at the same time. Pretty cool. During my junior year in high school, the seniors decided to flip every seat in the auditorium. All the chairs were bolted into the ground, by the way. The night before a morning school meeting, the class snuck in, unscrewed every chair, turned them backwards, and screwed them back in. When the meeting began on Tuesday morning, the entire school had to face backwards for the whole meeting. I enjoyed that one. Simple, but many hours of muffled laughter followed by the entire office erupting in laughter. Hooked up a wireless mouse to a co-worker's computer. He went 2 days cussing under his breath and changing out wired mice, holding them up in the air wondering what the hell was up. We passed the thing around, each person coming up with their own creative way to frustrate him. A while ago, somebody posted a rage comic about him getting drunk and waking up naked to a pissed off Asian guy screaming at him in some foreign language. The drunk guy sobered up quickly and started begging the Asian guy to speak in English. The Asian guy screams at him, "You drunken American spy. What are you doing in North Korea? Kim Jong-un will kill you pigs with nuclear fire." Double quote. The sobered guy starts sobbing and apologizing and telling him he has no idea how he got there. Asian guy won't have any of it. Pulls out a huge gun and tells him to lay down on the floor and pay his respects to North Korea and Kim Jong-un. The guy thinks he is about to die until his dad walks in, tells him to get dressed and that the Asian guy is actually his co-worker John, and tells him never to get blackout drunk on his couch again. Guy, in comic. You motherfucking thundercunt. Son of a bitching fuckward. That was by far the worst prank that has ever been played on me. Dad, you're a genius. Double quote. Funniest thing I've ever heard. That guy has an incredible dad. If the guy sees this, please comment. Me and my friend played a prank on my flatmate. She is very paranoid that at any time she may be being spied on. One day when her room was left open and she was not around, we decided to spring to action. My friend got into her bed and covered himself with her duvet, showing no body parts, so it was just a lump in her bed that looked like it could have been anyone. I moved to the corner of the room and took a picture of this scene. So, I had a picture of her room with what looked like a person in her bed. I then photoshopped this picture to look like it was taken with a night vision camera. It had a timestamp, was grainy and greeny in color. It looked good. We wrote "Sweet Dreams" on the back of this picture, then posted it to her. She opened this letter and looked at the picture. She obviously thought it was a camera in her room taking pictures of her sleeping. She fucking freaked. We played up to it for a bit, but we had to tell her it was us when she was about to call the police. After a night of drinking, one of my friends left us to play a youth soccer game, ages 15-18. Turned out the field was across the street. So at 9 AM, as the only people other than a couple parents, we came across with signs, a megaphone, and his name spelled out in body paint. For 2 hours, he hid on the other side of the field as we chanted non-stop. When he scored a goal, we stormed the field and carried him off. Needless to say, he refuses to hang out with us now, and we are banned from a youth league field whenever there's a soccer tournament on it. when I was 16. My next door neighbor wanted me to be part of a prank on his friend from school who was always talking shit about being hardcore and knowing drug dealers, etc. The kid was about 14 or 15 at most. So we set it up that I would meet this kid with his friends on a rarely used dirt track in the park. Overgrown, out of the way, etc. This kid was the only one not in on it. I turned up wearing a backpack and hoodie. I was with one of his friends who had a BB gun stuffed in his belt line and was wearing a balaclava and army type pants so he wouldn't be recognized. The kid turned up with his friends who had an envelope stuffed with money, paper. He looked wary the whole time and I could tell he was further into any of this than he wanted to be. I did the meetup. Handed over the backpack. They handed me the envelope. Then we planned for another neighbor to walk down the same path. Dressed a cop. Our cop friend starts yelling, "What's going on down there? Hey. Hey. Dot." The kid legs it out of there faster than anyone could have expected. We fired off some party poppers for extra effect when he was out of sight with his friends. Had he been the hardcore kid he talked himself up to be, he'd probably have recognized the difference in sound. I didn't even want to be part of the prank when they put it to me. I was just hustled into it. Having said that, I'm glad I did it. It was hilarious and apparently that kid settled down a school after it. TL. Doctor set up a drug meet. Did an exchange. Got busted by a cop. Watched a kid's face invent a new shade of pale. I usually am difficult to cousin. Especially from prank calls. But I have to give credits to how damn convincing this kid sounded. So I get a call from a number I don't recognize. And for whatever reason, I answered. Immediately, I hear the most well-rehearsed, confident rant from some federal agent that played perfectly to my minor paranoia concerning illegal downloads. He knew and stated my full name, my address, and IP address, a random one. But I didn't have mine memorized. My heart was pounding, my voice tremulous, as I recalled the horror stories of 18-year-olds owing thousands of dollars for nothing more than music pirating. He presented some equation for a fine, derived from specific amounts of pirated data resulting in two possible outcomes. Some $100,000 fine or court, the latter leading to possible jail time. Finally, he gave the phone to my appointed lawyer who was a friend of mine attending an out-of-state college. Which explained why the voice number was unrecognizable and how he knew my information. But seriously, the kid was too convincing. I found out he was in law school and this was about the 10th time they've done this. So they had the script down and perfected. It might not sound that bad, but it was a solid 7 minutes of hell. It's a simple prank. But when I was around 10, my dad moved my mom's car to the other side of the grocery store parking lot. We weren't there with her. We showed up while she was in the store and did it. She said she was about a minute from reporting it stolen when she finally found it. I mailed a friend a box of 1,000 live crickets purchased for $20 from a website that supplies lizard owners. Expecting another package in the mail. She hurriedly opened the cricket box without checking where it was from. The sight of the cricket surprised her enough to drop the box, spilling its jumpy contents. Many of the crickets were able to be scooped back up and taken outside. However, some of the more adventurous crickets managed to disrupt her sleep for several nights until the cat finished hunting them down. It was on Valentine's Day, about 2 years ago, and my school had a secret candy delivery service. So you could send your crush a card and candy all anonymously. During class, some girls came and read a declaration of love for my best friend that went something along the lines of, "We have known each other for many years now, and I have always felt a special way about you. I feel that if I don't tell you I might come to regret it. I know this is sudden and weird, but I just have to tell you. So just turn to your right and you will know who I am." At that moment the whole class turns to his right, me included. I turn and see a window. And when I turn to the left, I realize my friend is to the left of me and everyone is giving me a look. It's then that I realize the card was sent as if I was confessing my love to my friend. It was really funny in hindsight, but everyone thought I was gay for a good while after that. My dad has told me lots of stories about his pranks from when he was in college. He has lots of good ones, but this one always stood out to me as my favorite. So my dad and his friends were really big into biking. They rode everywhere, including school, which was 5 miles away and up a steep hill. Of the two guys that he lived with, one was his best friend and the other was a friend, but someone he didn't really like all that much. My dad was going to school to get a degree in metallurgy, and for one of his projects he had these big thin long steel bars. My dad and his best friend decided to fill a pump up with water and pump their other roommate's tires up with water instead of air. They wrapped the steel bars with newspaper so that they wouldn't bang together, took the guy's seat off, and slid the bars into the frame of his bike. After this was complete, his bike probably weighed 20 pounds more than it had. They rode to school and gave him shit for how out of shape he was for about a month before the guy rode off a curb and burst his tire and was surprised to see water spraying out. They actually managed to convince him it was due to condensation inside the tire. They were both physics related majors. He wasn't. The best part, they never took the steel bars out of the frame, and he never knew. When my dad was in college, some guys in the dorm tricked their unsuspecting roommate by taking the door of the hinges and locking it, so it was held in place only by the bolt. They then filled a big plastic trash can with snow, tied it to the doorknob, and hung it out the window. So this poor sap comes back after a long day of classes and unlocks his door only to see it fly, apparently for no reason whatsoever, straight out the window. And he's left there holding his keys, mouth gaping open. On Halloween when I was younger, I went up to a neighbor's door to go trick-or-treating. Right before I reached the door, the guy answers the door with blood dripping out of his mouth and is gnawing away at a detached foot. He holds it out to me and says, "You want some?" Then growled and started chasing after me and my friends. Now normally people stop before they get to the end of their porch or whatever, but the guy kept on going. Finally 3 blocks away from his house he stops, smiles, waves and says Happy Halloween, then heads back home. That was one of the weirdest trick-or-treating moments. Oh, that reminds me of another one. My friend was blind and had glass eyes, which he could easily remove. When he went to people's houses, he would hold them in his hand, open his eyes, which were just empty eye sockets, and when the people answered the door he would yell trick. It was fun watching their face slowly transform from confusion to disgust and disbelief. Haha. Late to the show, but one time my GF was staying at my place. I live in a not so great area, and I mentioned earlier in the night about how I hoped her car window didn't get smashed from parking overnight outside my apartment. She kept telling me how pissed she'd be if that happened. Fast forward to the next morning. We're talking about driving to get breakfast somewhere. She hops in the shower. A light bulb goes off in my head. I grab her car keys, run outside and roll the passenger window all the way down on her car. I then pick up pieces of glass off the sidewalk, probably from previously smashed windows, and place a bunch on the car seat and floor. We walk out to her car 5 minutes later and I play dumb and surprised, and she's just grabbing her head cursing. She realized rather quickly what I had done due to the size of the glass, but she said for a few seconds there she was so upset. When my best friend was getting married and I was throwing the bachelor party, I had access to a truck through work that none of my friends knew about. On the day of the bachelor party, one friend and I parked the truck near a strip club we knew we were going to first that night. Later, as we left the club, everyone was debating who should drive the cars since only one person, I don't drink, was sober. After everyone but one guy who was in on it had passed the truck, he called out, "The keys are in this truck. Let's take it." There was a quick drunken debate during which the guys had to literally throw the freaked out groom into the back of the truck and I insisted that I would drive. We tore out of there to another location. Later the groom asked me what I'd done with the keys. I told him I still had them. "You kept the keys?" Double quote. "Sure. How else are we going to get back?" Double quote. TL. DR. At his bachelor party I convinced my best friend we were stealing a car. My uncle was a prank king, he and his brother fucking masters of the trade. Anyway, they took 25 or so superpower maglights and dug them into holes while on. They then came into their little brother and started flipping shit, and they told him that aliens had landed. At this time his brother was only 10 or so. He looks out the window and sees in the forest 25 lights in the sky. This scared the shit out of him. They then proceeded to run away with their friends in pursuit. The aliens eventually overtook my uncle and his brother and now chase the other brother. After 5 minutes they caught up to him and stay in character till they reached the ship or 25 maglights. The reaction they got was one of shock, terror and bribery. As soon as they reached the ship the gig was up and the greatest prank I ever heard of was over. My sister is bare Christian, and for her bachelorette party, she absolutely forbade anyone from hiring a stripper. They were painting their favorite scriptures onto canvases at one point. She really knows how to party. So I had to hire a fake stripper. So I asked my friend Alex if he'd be willing to do the job. Alex shows up to her door wearing this long trench coat, Sherlock Holmes hat, and a huge magnifying glass. He says there's been a crime in the area and he would like to come in to investigate. My sister's best friend, who answered the door, as it is her house, lets him in and he calls all the girls' attention. He gets in front of all the girls and introduces himself as Inspector Jerry, and he needs to inspect the bride by doing a reverse strip search. So music starts playing and he's really playing it up. My sister is freaking out. She tried to get up and leave, but her friends kept her there to watch. Finally, after about 2 minutes, he's starting to take off his trench coat when he says he has to confess that he's not a real inspector. He has the trench coat off and his back turned. And when he turns around, he has a shirt on that says gotcha. As he announces he's not a real stripper either. My sister was absolutely dying laughing, as well as the rest of the room. TLDR. I paid a friend to be a fake stripper at my bare Christian sister's bachelorette party. My dad's colleague, we'll call him James, got a new BMW and left the spare key for it on his desk. Another colleague of his, Bill, took the spare key and James completely forgot that one ever existed. Over the next few months, James would come to work in his new car. Delighted with it, it was the best thing in the world. Bill would go to the car park whenever he had a chance and just open one of the windows. He would do this every day with the same window until James started realizing he wasn't accidentally leaving the window open. He was getting really annoyed as this new car was his baby and she was acting up. But he was more concerned than anything. It got to the point that nobody could figure out what was going on, so BMW sent out a team of experts to measure things like static electricity which may be causing the window to open by itself. After coming to no logical explanation, they just replaced the whole door. After the door was replaced, Bill continued to play his little prank, but instead of opening the same window as before, he left a different one open. This whole thing went on for the space of about 6 months. I don't know how James eventually figured it out, but needless to say, he wasn't happy at all. The rest of the lads found it hilarious. I had just gotten done with our high school swing show and my family was going to go celebrate at our pub. Yes, we own a pub. Anyway, I'm driving and my sister and my mom are in the car. As I'm heading downtown, I see a cop car sitting in some parking lot. I decide to slow down. My mom's like, "Make sure you're not going too fast." I go, "Mom, I'm going 15 miles per hour. I'll be fine." I go past the car when he decides to turn around and put his lights on. I'm freaking out. So here I am downtown. For once in our small town every parking spot is full. So what do? I stop in the middle of the road in front of everyone to get my ticket. The officer asks me for my license. I realize I left my license at home. He asks me for my registration. He tells me the registration is expired. He's already telling me how big my fine is going to be and has me pull into an empty parking spot. By now, the officer wants to go speak to my dad at this time. He asks me where my dad is at and where we were headed to, and I tell him we're heading down to the pub. I was 18 at the time, so obviously illegal. So here I am getting ticketed. Have no license, expired registration, and I'm heading down to the pub underage. I'm doomed. I walk into the pub and what happens? A big surprise. The place was filled with my friends and family as they were celebrating my birthday from a couple weeks before. To end it even funnier, I'm in so much shock from the police and my friends I go, "I'm sorry, I've got a situation out here." Referring to the police, of course. And then, as planned, the policeman was just messing with me too. TL. Doctor got pulled over by a cop. Was pranked by all of my friends and family. Cop was a fraud. A friend and I pulled a sort of double prank a few years ago at our college. We started by creating a mock survey on our university's letterhead that basically hinted that the school was looking to cut some majors to save money. The thing is, the survey was designed to be really confusing and not make a whole lot of sense. Some of the questions were like, how economically feasible do you think your major is, or my major isn't not a top priority for the school to not endorse. T or F. Anyway, we printed off about 600 of these and handed them out around campus. We told students that they needed to call a number on the bottom of the form and ask where to turn in their individual major related surveys. The second part of the prank was that the number belonged to a friend of ours who had no idea what we had done. She apparently started getting a bunch of calls from confused students about halfway through the day. TL. Dr. A friend and I created a confusing survey and handed out about 600 copies. We put our unsuspecting friend's number at the bottom and told the students to call with any questions, concerns. I was camping with Boy Scouts this past weekend. And I went in my Vibram 5 fingers Akato shoes. Those things absorb stink no none other. And after 200 plus miles in them, they smell like rancid shit from hell. The toe socks stink even worse. My brother smelled my socks downstairs through my closed door. I decided to not wear any other socks this week, so the smell is especially putrid. Some new 11-year-old scouts were being annoying. Especially this one named Chase. He was kicking and shoving other scouts, calling people names, refused to stop talking, and was a general little shit. So when he went to bed I snuck into his tent and laid the socks across his face and went merrily to bed. About 2 in the morning I hear a loud ew and the sounds of someone vomiting. I come out, and there is Chase puking and crying, with a toe sock still on his head. I laugh and go back to bed as my scout master comes to the scene. Once my roommate and I spent an afternoon sewing all the sleeves closed on our other roommate's long-sleeved shirts. The sewing was done right at the end of the sleeve, so he would stick his arm through but then not be able to get his hand out. When he first discovered them, he thought that the dryer had melted all of his sleeves together. It was awesome. When my dad was in his early 20s he had a friend who had a really nice brand new convertible and was obsessed with it. Talked about how awesome it was, how fast it went, how much better it was than the pieces of shit they drove. Basically was a total douche about his awesome car. So my dad and his friends started carrying gas cans around town in their own cars. And every time they would hang out with this guy or see his car around town, they'd put a gallon of gas in his tank. Kept it up for a month or two and then everyone stopped all at once. Apparently the douche friend spent hours making himself look like an idiot, yelling at the dealership that he was not getting the gas mileage he used to and something was wrong with the car. Of course the people at the car dealership were staring at him like he was completely off his gourd. The late 1960s? Of course his car wasn't getting 40 miles to the gallon. There used to be a Dutch hidden camera show called Booba Trap in which they play pranks on people who are known to play pranks on others. So if you knew someone whose pranks got out of hand, you signed that bastard up for Booba Trap. There was a guy once who was notorious for his pranks. What he did made me realize how much of a crazy genius he is. One of his jokes was he used to tell people who were visiting his neighbor that her ears were plugged, and that they had to talk louder for her to hear. The way Booba Trap pranked him was equally genius. He was known to stroll around the woods, so they converted an abandoned building somewhere in those woods to a fake military base. Once he got in the vicinity of the building, People dressed as soldiers walked out and pulled him into the premise and said a dangerous gas which may cause hallucinations was accidentally released inside. They questioned him to determine whether he was exposed or not. During that session, people walked in and out of the room making weird noises, gestures and doing weird dances. The way that looked made me laugh really hard. It was something like retarded people trying to mime. The people who questioned him all maintained a straight face and he kept asking them if they could see what if he was seeing. He really believed he saw hallucinations. Edit. I'm still actively looking for the video. If I can't find it after tomorrow, I'll assume it's simply not on the internet. One time during the holidays, a bunch of my cousins were over at my house. We were hanging out late playing video games in the basement. Then one of the guys fell asleep before anyone else. So one of us went upstairs, grabbed a hot dog out of the freezer, put some hot sauce on the end of it and went to wake him up. The prankster pulled down his zipper, put the hot dog through the hole, and started pushing the hot dog with the hot sauce tipped to the lips of the sleeping guy. He started sucking on his lips, felt the heat and woke up to see a man standing in front of him with a zipper down and piece of meat sticking out pressing on his lips. He jumped up and screamed, slapping the hot dog away. We were all dying from laughter until our stomachs hurt. This one is dumb, but it was pretty funny at the time. We like to mildly troll my day camp kids, just to throw a little psychological scarring into the mix. One time my fellow camp leader and I told them all to go line up in front of the tree, then started saying no. We said in front of the tree, and repeated it to watch as they kept switching where they were lined up for a few minutes. Once the kids picked up on what we were doing, we all had a good laugh. The best prank I've ever been victim of was when I was very young, about 5, I would say. My dad always played music on the stereo system, and before dinner our job was to turn it off. One day, though, no matter what we did, the music just wouldn't stop. My dad started getting really angry at us, yelling to stop fooling around and just turn off the music already. Even turning off the entire system didn't work, and my brother and I were getting very agitated. Then my dad revealed that the whole time, the music had been playing from the computer. We hadn't even known that that was possible. Oh, the good old days. My family still tells that story, and I have no idea how my dad kept a straight face throughout it. My first job out of college was a programmer for a consulting firm that assisted the Marine Corps. One day, a Lieutenant Cole joined the firm, and immediately decided that I was his prank target. His previous job? Deactivating landmines in Afghanistan. As I meandered to work that morning, I went and got my coffee and prepared to sit down. Right before I sat, I noticed something large and metal in my seat. It was a goddamn landmine. It was deactivated, at least I told myself that. But it freaked me out. So, you know by now, you shouldn't mess with a programmer who is vengeful. As I worked on the user interface, we did test runs in test artillery fields. The Lieutenant Colonel was all about showing that he could use the system. But I put a Easter egg for him that when he entered his call sign, the system would miss by a fraction of a degree. He would compete with the other staff SGTS who liked me, and they were all in on the joke. They would hit 30/35 targets, and he would hit only 5/35. As he missed, one by one, he would get more furious. I could have been into a lot of trouble for that Easter egg, but luckily, I told my supervisor who told my CEO. The CEO told the Lieutenant Cole's commanding officer. At the end of the first round, the CEO said, "Lieutenant Colonel, you're just having a tough time. Why don't you change your calls into Prince of Shapir?" He used my actual name. The Lieutenant Colonel did it, and he hit 33 out of 35. TLDR. Don't mess with a programmer. He'll just embarrass you. When I was about 10 years old, I had a habit of jumping out and scaring my 9-year-old brother, who at the time was very susceptible to such tactics. My parents would get pretty upset with me. But for some reason I couldn't or wouldn't stop being a little shit. One night, I climbed into his bed while he was brushing his teeth, wearing my plastic skull mask with a black cloth hood. When he got to the doorway of his room I sat up and howled at him. He ran screaming. Of course. And I almost choked to death on my gleeful laughter. A day or two later, my dad had the bright idea of teaching me a cautionary lesson. He pulled the same exact tactic, same mask. Hid in my bed. Unbeknownst to him, my brother had learned to be wary when coming to bed. And he peeked into my room before continuing past and into his own, to make sure I was laying in my bed. When my dad sensed the presence, he bolted out of bed and lunged screaming at the doorway. I, downstairs, heard only his shrieking, followed by his sobbing as my dad, mortified, attempted to apologize. Fortunately all is, mostly, forgiven these days. Though my brother still attributes the worst scare of his life not to me, but to our father. TLDR, my dad tried to teach me a lesson for always scaring my little brother. Accidentally scared the bejesus out of my brother instead. I know a guy who got a letter from the hospital telling him he had to come in for tests because somebody had signed him in as a recent sexual partner after having a gynecological exam. He was called in to have a proctological examination, to check his prostate, rectum muscle and check for water the rot of the penis. In preparation he should feel good, have eaten, have plenty of time, have emptied his bowels the last hour, not have been at the dentist the last 24 hours. Bring ID in the letter from the hospital with him at visit. Not really looking forward to the visit, he went to the hospital, but the receptionist couldn't find the proctology department. Nor did similar departments find any information about his appointment. After talking to several nurses and doctors trying to find his way, they started noticing something's not quite right about the letter he had received. 1. Certain stamps who were supposed to be on the letter were missing. 2. When calling the number on the letter they reached the extermination company. 3. The doctor, Theodore Morell, he was supposed to see didn't work on the hospital. But Theodore Morell was Adolf Hitler's personal physician. The day was the 1st of April. Forgive me if you're one of the 2 people that read this last time I submitted. Our year group had a school trip to London at the end of our GCSE year, where we stayed in a hotel overnight. My roommate, let's call him Al, kicked me out of the room so he and his girlfriend could fool around, so I joined a few other friends in another room. We soon worked out how to phone the other rooms in the hotel. So another friend, Jay, putting on an East European accent, phoned Al, asking if there was a male and female under the age of 18 sharing a room, which he claimed was against the hotel's policy. After Al denied the claim, Jay said they would be sending up a member of staff to check. We then hurried over to Al's room, knocked on the door, where he urged us to leave quickly before the member of staff came up. I then stayed in the room with Al, as per our original room arrangement, and played along with the joke. It wasn't longer before the phone rang again. It was Jay again, saying no one could come upstairs at the moment, but asked Al to go to reception instead. He promptly went downstairs, walked right up to the man at reception and said, "I'm from the room upstairs. I was asked to come down about the underage sex thing." At that point we burst out laughing, watching from the sofas behind him. TL. Doctor tricked a friend into asking hotel reception from underage sex. My friends and I were trying to come up with the best insults against each other. This had been going on for months, and I was doing very well. Then one friend called me a name and said it was Turkish for sucker. I didn't bother to look it up or confirm, but I liked the way it sounded, and started using it myself. At a BBQ for my best friend's law school graduation party, my friend had taught everyone, including my best friend, his fiancée, all the parents, etc. to call me this Turkish name. I thought nothing of it since I have a thick skin and laughed it off. Days go by, and as I'm messaging my friend on chat, he calls me the Turkish word, and then out of pure fun, I decide to spell it backwards. It was almost as if God was telling me to. Lo and behold, as soon as I spell it backwards, I pause, put my head down in shame, and realize it was my first and last name spelled backwards. This had been going on for a week and everyone knew but me. How wretched this world is. The best damn summer camp prank I've ever heard of. This happened at a summer camp in Wisconsin. One of the camp counselors managed to get his hands on a gorilla suit. The counselors began casually mentioning a story about a gorilla that broke out of the zoo to the campers, not as a scary story, but as a if you see a gorilla, be careful type of thing. Over the course of a week, they slowly escalated it. After some campers took extra bananas from the dining hall to leave out for the gorilla, some staff ate them, messily, in the middle of the night and left the scraps at a different location. While a group of campers went canoeing, a counselor dressed up as the gorilla and cautiously went to the edge of the lake to get a couple sips of water before scurrying off into the woods. The campers were going nuts. After a couple more close calls and sightings, some of the older ones began to broadcast a theory that the counselors were dressing up as a gorilla on their breaks. One of the nights near the end of camp, the entire camp was gathered for an all-camp game in a field. During the game, the gorilla sauntered along the edge of the field before being scared by the excited cries of the campers who began to notice. He ran off. Meanwhile, the campers counted the staff and tried to figure out who was missing. All of the counselors and directors were present. And that's why maintenance men can be your greatest ally for summer camp pranks. Back in high school, someone started a fight during passing period on a second floor bridge that runs across the main hallway. People started to freak out and watch. And suddenly a guy gets pushed over the railing, holding on for dear life. Then he fell, with several screams as some girls jumped out of the way. Turned out it was just a dummy. I used to be a volunteer firefighter with two of my childhood friends. Our firehouse was surrounded by woods that stretched on for about a mile, with a busy road on the other side. On this road there was a bank, and behind the bank there was a little path through the woods that lead to the firehouse. One night, at around 11 PM, my friend Dave and myself were kicking it at the firehouse, waiting for my friend Kevin to get back from work. Kevin sent me a text saying he was on his way home, and I texted him back, after some planning with Dave, and told him that the bank had been robbed. The cops had stopped by the firehouse, and told us that they thought the suspect may have run into the woods, and to keep our eyes peeled. Kevin sped home, excited to come see the commotion. I put on a hoodie and ran about 50 yards into the woods, and hid behind a tree. Dave came out into the parking lot and was staring in the woods when Kevin pulled up. Kevin asked Dave if he had heard anything, and they decided to get the thermal imaging camera we had on one of our trucks to check things out. When they got out, I proceeded to throw rocks and branches to startle him a bit, and then started to move from tree to tree. He found me on the camera about 2 minutes later. When he saw me poking my head out from behind the tree, he freaked the fuck out. He dove behind a car, pulled out his cell phone, and was about to call 911. He was shaking, swearing under his breath, yelling at Dave to get down behind the car. Get down, damn it. That guy probably has a fucking gun and probably saw us seeing him, oh shit oh shit oh shit. Double quote. He was so fucking pissed. When my dad was about 18 years old, he went to a summer camp where he and his friends would do all sorts of crap. One year, his friend would always get up at 3 AM, on the dot, put on a ski mask, grab a pillow, and run over to a girl's cabin. He would sneak in and smack one girl with a pillow, and then run out before anybody else noticed he was there. The girl would sit up and scream something like, "Somebody hit me with a pillow," which would wake up the girls around her, who would see nobody there and just assume that she was crazy or having a dream or something. Over the course of the 10-night camp, he did the same thing every night to the same girl. She never found out who was hitting her. In high school, I was in National Honors Society. During the second to last meeting, the president got really serious and said that someone from NHS was caught cheating on a major test and would be kicked out, possibly suspended from school. He was very serious, and the principal came in to make the announcement with him. For the next 2 weeks, everyone in school was buzzing about who it was. Of course, half of NHS had cheated in some way, so everyone thought it could be them. Rumors were flying around. Everyone was speculating on who it was. On the day of the announcement, the president pulled out a letter and said it had the name of the person. The principal and dean are in attendance, and he opens the letter and announces the guy. Classroom is silent. The guilty person gets up, tells everyone to fuck off, and leaves. Absolute silence. The president then pulls out a stereo and says that there is a tradition when people get ejected, and he doesn't like it, but it must be done. He hits play, and the radio belts out na 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 na. Hey hey hey. Goodbye. Everyone is shocked. Then the door opens, and the ejected member walks in with a stack of pizzas. The joke's on us. TD Dr. Our HS faculty and NHS president faked a suspension of a student in order to throw us a pizza party. At Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, in residence, there were 2 kids to a room, 2 desks, and 2 beds, one against each wall. The Joker got a key to the room of the 2 victims. They knew the 2 men's schedules, when they were in class each morning, and also that each morning a cleaning staff came into each room and made up the beds, did some cleaning, etc. When the victims left for class, the Joker went into the room, pushed the 2 beds together, ruffled up the sheets, and made it look like they slept together. Later that morning, before the kids returned from class, the cleaning staff came in, made up the beds, and pushed them back against the walls. The kids didn't see it coming. After a few weeks of this, both kids got a letter from the pastor minister employed by Queen's asking them to come in for an interview. Oh, and another prank. I am in the army now, with an extraordinarily gullible roommate. So one day my friend Frank pounds on my door at 0730. It's a Saturday, so I act completely perplexed as to why he's there. My roommate, Bill, is still passed out, having played video games until 5 AM. Frank tells us that one of our destroyers has been sunk in the Persian Gulf, and Iran has begun to posture themselves for military action. No one knows who did it, but the Iranian Navy was conducting exercises in the area at the time. Frank has to make sure all of our gear is serviceable. Then we have to drive to the office and receive further orders. Bill is skeptical at first, so I discreetly unplug our internet router so he can't go online and check the news outlets. Frank starts inspecting our gear, and we start packing as fast as we can. Every 2 minutes or so, one of our other friends would run up to our room in uniform, panicking about the whole situation. Bill was still a little skeptical, so our team leader, in on the whole thing, sent him a text affirming the instructions. Cue the panic. We load up our gear into Frank's car, and try to stop Bill from phoning home. We start driving in the direction of the office, and Bill is flipping out, pissed because he can't get service on his phone, terrified because he was missing a few magazine pouches, babbling on and on about what war with Iran would be like, until we drove straight past the office and off to Denny's for breakfast. I paid for his food, but he still hasn't forgiven me. A long time ago, before I was born, there was a student going to my high school to be. This guy had a girlfriend at a rival high school across town, and every day he would visit her during her lunch period. So he started noticing one day that all of the seagulls that marauded his school during his lunch hour would then all fly to his girlfriend's high school for her lunch hour. The lunch hours were offset. At my high school, lunch was at 12:00 and at the rival high school it was at 1:00. So one day him and his friends came to school with chocolate laxatives pressed into pieces of bread. They fed the seagulls during lunch, which then flew to the rival high school, giving just enough time for the laxatives to take effect. What happened next was the most glorious shit raining storm in recent history. Literally covering everything in sight. The principal had to recruit extra janitors from other schools to get the campus cleaned up before the next school day. His girlfriend didn't tell anyone it was him. They're now married and have their own kids going to the same school. TLDR. A student at my high school caused a hailstorm of bird droppings to be unleashed on our rival high school. Whenever you're in need of a cab in the Netherlands and want to have a laugh, you should try the following. Note that cabs over here need to wait in line for customers. And customers looking for a fare are obliged to get into the first cab in line. Anyways, you go to the first cab in line and tell the chauffeur that you need to get home but don't have any money on you. Proceed to tell him that you are willing to suck him off as payment for the fare. If you're a guy, the chauffeur usually tells you to get lost, hopefully. Repeat this with every cab waiting in line except for the last one. Instead of offering him a blowjob in return for a ride home, you just give him your destination and agree upon a price. When you get in the cab, he will drive past all his colleagues you just offered a blowjob. So just turn down your window and wave at them as they stare at their colleague in shock. I've posted this elsewhere, but my co-worker had been going on for weeks about her new MacBook Pro she was getting. As a graphic designer, she had a computer at work but decided to show off and work on her new laptop the first day she got it. Which just so happened to be April Fool's Day. Unfortunately for her, she didn't disable the Bluetooth on it. So my $15 Apple remote, which came with my 5-year-old MacBook, had no issues repeatedly launching iTunes and playing random songs throughout the day. She was literally on the verge of tears and about to go return it to the Apple Store when I finally revealed the prank by announcing it on the company Facebook page. Because I ran our social media. That made the delayed reaction when she logged into Facebook about 15 minutes later even more priceless. When I was in college, my roommate and our friend across the hall got into a prank war. I warned them both that I had better not get caught in the middle. Well, the guy across the hall pulled a prank on me that was meant for my roommate. So, I waited 6 months until everybody had forgotten about the prank war. Then I made cupcakes. I actually made 2 batches of cupcakes. I made ones with pink wrappers and ones with blue. The blue ones were just your regular chocolate cupcakes. The pink ones contained the extra ingredients of potassium nitrate and Congo red pH indicator. So, I show up one day with these cupcakes that my mom baked for me, giving the blue ones to other people on the hall and the pink ones to the guy I was targeting. Well, potassium nitrate, also known as saltpeter, is a horse diuretic and Congo red is an indicator dye that turns red in the typical pH range of urine. So, you can imagine what happened. It's sophomore year, and one of my friend's birthdays is the 1st of April. So my roommate and I concoct a brilliant plan. First, we bought him a Clash of the Titans poster as an actual gift. Then, while he was at class, we broke into his room. Broke into isn't really the right phrase. He never locked the door and his sweet mate was there anyway to let us in. Took everything he owned and hid it in our room. And I mean everything. We took all the clothes in his closet, stuff in his drawers, his TV, his microwave, all of his chairs, his refrigerator, his mattress. We took the fucking mattress. And we left the poster face down on his bare bed springs. For the next 4 or 5 hours all of that stuff sat in our room. A very obvious fire hazard. While we waiting for him to come back from class and burst in on us in disbelief. Which eventually he did. Best part. Not a single person, raw or otherwise, stopped us or asked us what we were doing carting a mattress up the stairs. While carrying the fridge we even started singing out loud, "Don't look at this fridge. We're stealing it." No fucks were given. So there are already too many comments to this thread, so I don't think too many people will see this but fuck it. I have been sitting on this one too long. So 2 of my friends, let's call them Ram and Shyam, were living in a dorm in rooms right across each other. They started off with little league stuff like replacing the names of all contacts in Ram's phone with those of Superheroes and quickly escalated from there. They would keep pranking each other for over a year, but the best of the lot was this one. Shyam would pee in a saucer during the morning and store that saucer in the freezer of his fridge. Come the night, he would take this little disc of frozen pee and slide it under Ram's door. So Ram would wake up every day to Puddle's piss right in the middle of his room. Night after night of piss on the floor. Drove him fucking crazy. He kept accusing his roommate of having some combination of bedwetting and sleepwalking. To this day I don't think he knows what the fuck was going on.